Well, Sil, thanks very much for joining us here on the Asian Game. Pleasure to have you on the show. We'll get to talking about the FIFA Women's World Cup shortly, but I wanted to start by talking about your career and involvement in football. It almost sounds weird to be talking about that in the past tense, given how young you still are. Unfortunately, injury curtailed your career. But for our listeners and our viewers who perhaps aren't aware, can you just give us a quick snapshot of your career and your involvement in the game up until this point?
Okay, thanks, Paul, for having me. Yeah, as you said, I'm still young. I'm around 27. I did start football at age 6 or 7, and it's like most of the girls. I really did start influenced by my father and my brother. They used to play football, so I used to join them. And as time passed, I noticed that I do love football. It's a passion, but I thought that I was the only girl who used to play in Lebanon. I used to follow Marta. Marta was the only player I really watched on TV, or I saw videos of Marta on YouTube. But I didn't know that teams existed. And it was until I was 12 that I knew that there was a league in Lebanon. I joined the team. I started playing in Lebanon. Things started to get a bit serious. We went into I took a road where I was starting to play with the national team, playing with teams, but I always had this idea in mind that it's not developed. We don't get what we deserve. We invest time, we invest money, we invest effort, and we get nothing in return. So I was always this person who used to nag or ask for better conditions, better material conditions and equipment. And we used to train at 10 p.m. or 9 p.m. and we were 15 years old girls. So yeah, it was weird. Why should we train at 10 p.m. and men used to train at 4 p.m. or 5 p.m.? So I was always the one who used to nag about this. And as I grew, I noticed that despite loving the game and love being a football player, I really think that I need to give something back or I need to change something, especially that I lived inside the situation, so I really know what used to happen. And this is why after I got the ACL at age 22, 23, yeah, I think, or 24, it was 2019, so 4 years ago, I decided to stop playing, especially that the recovery was just during COVID, so it was a very tough recovery, and it was a tough one, yeah. And I decided that I'm gonna stop playing. I had a master's in sports management, so I wanted to combine this management learning or experience with something in sociology, because I believe that the only way to develop something is to know the real reason behind it, which is the sociological aspect, how things happen between people, between the person and the society. And that's why I started this PhD. So I believe I had a career. It was a kind of a short career, especially on the senior level. But I think we're gonna discuss this later on. But it's something that usually happens in the Middle East. You don't really play a very long career. You play until you start playing at age 12, 13, but you stop playing at age 24, 25, or even at age 20, because it's not professional. You have to work, you have to build a family, you have to continue your studies. So football isn't really the priority in these countries. You try to put a lot of effort because you love the game and it's your passion, but you can't have this vision of a long career or long path in the game.
You referenced the PhD there. I want to talk about that a little bit because I find it endlessly fascinating what you're doing. Could you just tell us a little bit about what it is that you are studying for your PhD, what you've discovered so far, and a little bit of the background behind all of that?
Okay, it's a comparative study on women's football from a sociological point of view between Lebanon and France. And it's to keep it short, it's to better understand how can we build a career, a female footballer's career, by taking into consideration the importance of religion, importance of family, importance of tradition, importance of school, and to see how in France how they shape this career. And what comes first? Does the player comes first? Is she on an equal level as the boys? And to compare this in Lebanon, to compare this to Lebanon, hoping to put in place a plan, development plan for many countries in the Middle East to take this female football career to a whole new level. Because as you know, Pauline, especially that you are working in Asia, you know that the problem is we lack this professionalism. We don't really have this strong basis. So you start a plan, you start it on a short term of 2 3 years, you get something back, but on the long term you have nothing back. So what I'm trying to do is put a plan and try to figure out how can we guarantee a better future for women's football in Asia or in the Middle East.
You mentioned a lack of development, lack of professionalism there in Lebanon as it refers to women's football. What is the current landscape, current environment as it ascertains to women's football in Lebanon? Can you just give us some background to that?
I think we're at the unfortunately we're at the bottom. What's happening with the youth category is it's quite impressive. In 2019, 2017, 2018, just before COVID, a new head coach came to Lebanon, a new head of women's football came, and they put in place a plan with a focus on the youth categories. They wanted to structure the youth categories with under 15, under 17, under 19 leagues and national teams. So this was a very good basis. But then you know about what happened in Lebanon with the explosion of 4th of August and the COVID crisis and the revolution that happened in Lebanon. So we found ourselves in a very complicated place with a crisis, economical crisis, and this crisis created a lot of problems because in Lebanon, football or sports is never the priority. Priority is for political aspects, for the cultural aspects or religious aspects, and it's not about sports. So when the country is in a bad place financially or economically, they're gonna put football last or sports last. So now we're at the stage where the youth teams are doing excellent. The youth national team has won many tournaments, under 18 West Asian tournament, under 15. They're being excellent on a regional level, but if you dig deep into the Lebanese society or Lebanese football system, you're gonna find out that football is in a very bad place, both men and women. We lack investors. Maybe in men it's better, but in women's football we lack investors. Teams pay from their own pockets. Many team managers or team presidents, they pay from their own pockets, and they're just individuals who are passionate about the game. So I really hope things gonna change. We're gonna try to find a solution. We're gonna find investors, but we're in a very tough situation.
We've seen a real chronic lack of investment, care, development in terms of women's football in the Middle East. And there's a whole lot of social, cultural, religious reasons as to why that might be the case. Can you just talk to us a little bit about the development or lack thereof of the game in the Middle East? And then in the last couple of years, we have seen Saudi Arabia invest heavily in women's football, which is to be applauded, I think. Can that act as a catalyst for further investment, further development from other nations in the region? Do you think they perhaps might follow Saudi Arabia's lead and increase their investment in their own women's programs, and this might lead to a greater investment across the entire region as a whole?
What's happening in Saudi Arabia, I think it's for now it's gonna be the only exception. Of course, the reason behind this investment is the Saudi Plan 2030 that is put in place, as well as the country's plan to host the 2030 Men's World Cup. So investing in women's football is a must when you bid for the World Cup. Investing in women's football is a must. This also happened in Qatar. Qatar didn't really invest in women's football there. It was just temporary until they got the bid and they got the acceptance and they won the bid. So for now, what's happening in Saudi Arabia is an exception. If you dig in all the other countries, Lebanon is a very tough place. Syria is a very tough place. Palestine, they can't get things done. Jordan invested in women's football like no other country did. They're always the first to invest. But at this point, I know from many friends that despite professionalizing the league, and the league is now professional, it's not gaining in power. So they're like in a stable position, and they've been in this stable position for so long now. In Qatar, we said that it's not that good. In Kuwait, it's not that developing. So what's happening in Saudi Arabia is really an exception. It's developing like I've never imagined it to develop. It's impressive what's happening there. I have a couple of friends who are playing in Saudi Arabia, and they're telling me that they're being treated like queens. They're like real football players, professional football players, and this is something they've never seen in Lebanon or even in Jordan. So it is a hopeful step forward in Saudi Arabia. I really hope that other countries will follow through, especially countries with a good economical base. So, for example, Qatar, or even I know that there are many teams in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. So, I really hope that something can be put in place to develop the sport there. In Bahrain are really interested into women's football, but the country's small size maybe impacting the possibility to develop. For Saudi Arabia, I really hope it's not just uh, a temporary plan, because we've seen it in Qatar. I really hope that what's happening with the men's league can take the women's league forward, especially that money is here, money is available. They're investing in the men's teams. Women's league is developing. The teams are buying players from many countries, and most recently, Al Nasser, the team where Cristiano Ronaldo signed, they signed a head coach, and I've totally forgot her name, Kelly Lindsay. She's the former U.S. national team player, and she was the head of women's football in Morocco. She was the reason why Morocco put in place this development plan. So this is a very important step forward for Al Nasser. It shows that they are really no, it's Ittihad. Sorry, it's Ittihad with Benzema, and it shows that they are taking the step forward to further develop women's football, and that they really wanna reach a higher level.
Speaking about Morocco, they do have a player on their national team who does play in Saudi Arabia for Al Ahly. We've seen the massive amount of investment that's going into Saudi Arabian football at the moment, into their men's program. Even talk now that Kylian Mbappe might actually head there, believe it or not. In a relative sense, could you see that kind of investment happening in women's football as well? Could perhaps more players from the Moroccan national team perhaps head to Saudi Arabia and look to increase the standard of it overall? And could it eventually become kind of the predominant women's league across the entire MENA region as well, given the investment that they're putting in? Can you foresee that happening?
I think this is the first step forward, the first step that's gonna happen. I believe that many Moroccan players who can't or are unable to find a contract in Europe, like Rosella Ayan in Tottenham, or the others, they might be interested in joining the Saudi league, especially that there's a point that many don't really know, that the Saudi league is not very long. It's a 4 month or 6 month league. So many players, for example, even in Lebanon, they go to Saudi Arabia, they play the league there, then they go back to Lebanon and they play the Lebanese league here, because it's two different calendars. So this might be put in place in Morocco, for example. I know that Jordan are even considering this, putting a partnership between Jordan and Saudi Arabia, so that both countries can invest together. So players from Morocco can go play in. I think they might be tempted to go play in Saudi Arabia. But as for the league becoming the dominant league in the world, let's say, or one of the dominant leagues, I think it's gonna take a longer time, because we know that in men's football we don't really have social problems such as human rights problems or LGBTQ rights problems. While in women's football, and we saw it when Saudi Arabia tried to invest in the Women's World Cup with Saudi 2030, many superstars like Alex Morgan or Megan Rapinoe or Vivian Miedema from the Netherlands, they questioned the sponsorship, because they believe that Saudi Arabia can't really sponsor a women's World Cup, and they don't even give the basic human rights to girls there. But what's really happening is that, and this is something that pisses me off, is that they don't really see the image, the real image, because I know that Saudi Arabia for so long, for many years, they used to prevent girls from driving their cars. There was very strict on this. But ever since the new prince or the new king came to reign in Saudi Arabia, these things have changed. I have a lot of people living there, my friends, my family, and the situation did change. Now girls can travel wherever they want without having their dad's permission. They drive cars, they can wear shorts, There is this change in society. It will take time to be shown to the world, but hopefully in 10 years time, 15 years time, especially if they get the World Cup 2030, uh, we never know. We've seen the money, we've seen the bid for Kylian Mbappe yesterday, so everything is possible.
Yeah, that's a longer conversation that we perhaps could get into maybe another time. But, speaking of Morocco, they are participating at this Women's World Cup. As I said, they've got the first hijabi player in their side, Nouhali Benzina. How significant is her inclusion and her participation in this tournament, and what it could mean for the future of women's football, particularly across the region, but across the world as well?
I think it's not that symbolic for her, because for her, just she's just playing her game, But I think what she doesn't, maybe she doesn't really uh, understand now, or she's not very really conscious that in a few years time, what she did during this World Cup will play a huge role in the future of women's football in the Middle East, or especially in these countries where girls tend to put on their hijab early. In Lebanon, we had this problem for so long that as soon as a girl puts on her hijab at around 12, 13 years old, she directly stops playing football. Because in her head, or the society taught her that playing football as a hijabi is haram, it's not right. This is not something that God wants. So what Nuhaila Benzina is showing, that she's playing on the biggest stage, and the biggest stage on the world is in the World Cup. And day after day, she's gonna show that being a hijabi isn't a crime. It's not something to be ashamed of. Putting on a hijab can't prevent you from doing what you love. So it will definitely play a very big role. It will also play a role on the countries where the idea of putting a hijab wasn't expected or appreciated. For example, I don't know if you've heard about the situation in France. France banned hijabi girls from playing football, and I think as far as I remember of, or according to what I studied so far and what I read, France is the only country in the world where hijabi girls can play football. And we can't forget that France is the country who hosts the bigger number of hijabis in the world, because of the immigrants from Morocco, from Algeria, from Tunisia, etc., etc. So having this ban shows that in France they still don't really appreciate the hijab. So hopefully, with the step that Nuhaila Benzina is doing, the these stereotypes will be broken and the new ideas will come in place.
I'll talk a little bit about the action now. I've got no doubt you've watched a lot of the action from here at the Women's World Cup. Who or what in particular has caught your eye so far in the matches that you've watched?
I'm a very big Brazil fan in men's football. So watching them yesterday impressed me, because in 2019 Brazil weren't very good, and recently in friendly games Brazil were having trouble finding their balance, because we all know that Brazil is the country with the biggest football show and the joga bonito. They like to enjoy their game. So yesterday we saw that there's this mix of enjoying football but also showing a good tactical awareness. And this is something we've not seen from the men's side for so long now. So Brazil did impress me. It shows that they are taking this seriously. It's not just about fun this time. But if I have to pick the team that impressed me the most so far, I have to go with Germany. Most people will say that they just played against Morocco and they have to wait for a bigger opponent. But if we really focus on the match and if you really look into the details, Morocco weren't that bad. Offensively, they did create something. Defensively, they wasted some missed passes. They some very silly mistakes, if I can say, and it cost them goals. And you can't really miss an easy pass in front of Germany. They're gonna punish you. But the way that Germany kept their build up, their pressing on the ball, the way that if you compare them to any other team, for example, if I tell you now Australia, who's the biggest star in Australia?
Sam Kerr.
Yeah, and if I tell you, for example, as Brazil, you're gonna tell me Debinha or Marta. If I tell you USA, you're gonna choose a player or two. In Germany, yesterday, you don't really find this player who's taking everything on her shoulders. Alexandra Pop is great, but Jule Brand is also great. Sarah Dabrit in the middle is great. So they're a complete team. They impressed me. Philippines today, I was happy, but in terms of real football, real talent, and a team that can really show the world that women can play real football, I really enjoyed Germany.
Yeah, I was at that Brazil-Panama game here the other night, and you spoke about Jogo Bonito. That third goal that they scored was just simply sublime. There was almost like a gasp across the media box as it went in. Didn't quite get a standing ovation. Maybe people were too frozen to actually get off their feet. It was quite cold, but it wasn't far off. It was beautiful football, and I think they've certainly laid down a mark, and now they've got the next game against France, which will be really important as well. So, they've laid down a marker, as I said, as one of the teams to beat. Just to finish off with then, if we look at the situation across Asia more generally, where do you see the rate of development in women's football more generally across the region? Because we've seen the rise in Europe over the last 5 or 6 years as well. Is Asian football developing, but it's not developing at the rate that it is in Europe? So that way, it then almost looks like it's in decline, or do you think it is in decline? Where do you see the rate of development within women's football and more generally across Asia?
I think the problem with women's football in Asia is once again this marketing aspect. If you just yesterday, I was preparing something for my podcast. I'm trying to work on this real content, sending videos on TikTok and Instagram, because this is what interests the youth. And I was checking South Korea squad. They have one player playing in Europe, and the rest of the players are playing in the local league in Korea. So maybe the Korean league is a good league in women's football, but I'm pretty sure that if most of them go play abroad, the level will automatically rise. For example, look at Japan. Japan, they won the World Cup, but if you look at the players, Kumagai was a Olympic starter for so many long time. Now she's playing in Bayern Munich. Same goes for many players. Australia, you can barely name someone who plays in the Australian league. So this situation put in place where most of the players know, for example, in Australia, know that it's better for Sam Kerr to play with Chelsea than staying in the Australian league. So for Asian football in general, I know that maybe the solution on the long term can be to invest in local leagues, but for now, for a player from Vietnam, if she really wants to develop her talent, maybe the solution can be to try to play abroad in Europe or in the US. So for now, this is the bigger problem, that on the actual time, Europe is steps ahead because of the whole situation. If you tell me that a player for example, Sam Kerr is playing with Chelsea women, you're gonna know who Chelsea is, because as men's football, Chelsea is a big force. Same goes for Olympique Lyonnais or Barcelona. If you say Aitana Bonmati, everything will say, okay, yeah, I know her because she plays with Barcelona. But if you go and tell me that a player with Vietnam is playing in the Vietnamese league, she won't get the spotlight as much as others. And maybe it's because of what you said at the beginning of the podcast, that everything there is the news are in their local language. It's not in English, so it might be also a factor. But what I've seen is that the future is promising. I like to look at the positives. The future is promising. China, they didn't have the best uh, game possible, but they did dominate Denmark in the opening game. Japan won, Australia won, Philippines today did something marvelous in the second game of their group. So it is promising. Vietnam, I know that we shouldn't talk about this, but Vietnam only lost 3-0 to the US. Thailand in the first game, Thailand in 2019, Thailand lost 13-0. So the gap between the countries in Europe and and America, especially South America and the US is and Asia, it's now minimized. You know, it's not as huge as big as it was in a few years' time.
Well, hopefully we see a few more wins for the Asian teams across the next couple of match days. Assile, that is where we have to leave things for today. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show to dig deep into to some of these themes. We probably could get you back on and dig a little bit deeper because I think the conversations are endlessly fascinating. Good luck with the PhD. Can't wait to see what conclusions come out of that. But for today, thanks for joining us here on the Asian Game.
Thanks a lot, Paul, for having me, and thanks for this podcast and how you're shedding light on Asian football. It's much needed.